So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rich Clark. I've been a hypnotherapist for the last 8 years and I've been a holistic therapist for the last 15 years. So this week I'm talking about relationships, and I've already talked about dating, and I'm now going to talk about the next one, which is marriage. Now most people would think it's talking about engagement, so I'm not going to talk about that because I think engagement is quite obvious and so forth. But with marriage, I'm going to talk about where it comes from, the ideas of it and how it works. So marriage, also called matrimony or wedlock, is a culturally and often legalised, recognised union between people called spouses. It establishes rights and obligations between them, as well between them and their children, if they have any, and between them and their in-laws. It is nearly a cultural universe, but the definition of marriage varies between cultures and religions, and over time, typically it's in an institution which interpersonal relationships, usually sexual, are acknowledged or sanctioned. In some cultures, it's actually marriage is recommended or considered to be compulsory before pursuing sexual activity. A marriage ceremony is called a wedding, while a private marriage is sometimes called an elopement. Now, if we look at the history of the idea of marriage was actually based on the idea of a contract. It was the idea of one family and another family would have a contract of putting their two families' wealth together and creating a new wealth. The idea of the white wedding dress was to be the idea of virginal, but it's also because most people didn't wear white, so the idea of it was cleanliness. Now, over time, marriage and so forth has become quite an interesting idea. So there's a lot of cultural ideas with this. So the idea is most weddings were done in the summer. The trouble is, because most people years ago, not now, hopefully, most people didn't wash very often. So this was in quite culture that people had it in the summer, and that's why people used to have a bouquet of flowers to get rid of the smell. There was all these sort of ideas of cultural belongings of this. And then obviously within that, marriage has changed. So people like the idea of when you got married, it was very hard to divorce. Now that's sort of changed. And over time, all these ideas of things. So what we've also now seen is the general trend is towards equal rights for women, ending discrimination and harassment against couples who are interracial, interfaith, interclass, same-sex, transnational, as well as immigrant couples with an immigrant spouse, and other minority couples. And these debates persist regarding the legal status of married women, leniency towards violence within marriage. Now people can split from marriages if there's violence within the marriage. Now, for many years, there was many people who were stuck in marriages because they were of a religious faith, and they couldn't get out of them. So the other thing as well is then we also get into this other thing of the customs such as dowry or a bride price. So in some cultures, people actually have there is some cultures, I think it's in Sudan, that people, like if you wanted to marry a Sudanese woman, you have to give the family a certain amount of cows. No, this is not everywhere, but these are just different things people had. In another way of a dowry is, like, for example, in some parts of India, they have to actually get a scarf sewn, and it's actually got all the parts of the family, which is all then, and there's a dowry passed onto onto the woman or the other partner. And then the other thing is as well is the marriageable age of sex. Like, for example, there was a lot of age things that they believed in marriage was as soon as some woman actually was in puberty, which is a disastrous thing to think of nowadays, but that was how it was. So a lot of people were married very young. Only about 150 years ago, there were people who were married young as 14, 13. And in some cultures, it was still, in some places, I think New York, and I think France, you could still marry people under the age of 16. Again, these things change. But another reason I think people end up, they marry for different reasons. So it's for legal reasons. People, legally, they want to be combined together. Socially, because of the social etiquette around them. Emotionally, financially as well, because the idea is for many people that the breadwinner was a male or the male figure. So then the idea was, it was very much instigated that a woman was a child-bearing, rearing person, and the man was the breadwinner. This is now changed. So people have now, there's men who work from home, people work from home, have children. Some people go to work and they have nannies. It's a lot of different things. Again, culture has changed this. And then we go into the idea of political reasons, spiritual reasons why someone meets, sexually, romantic. And in some areas of the world, marriage, there's arranged marriage, which we spoke about 2 weeks ago, and if you were interested in that, please look on my channel and watch that. Forced marriage, which is where people are forced into a marriage to help the person. Usually if a woman comes from a poor family, they were married into a wealthier family. Polygamy, which is the idea of people can have multiple marriages, and some religions actually allow that. So some religions allow you to have 5 wives, but then you must treat every wife the same. Then in other cultures they have polygamy, so they'll have one wife for one who's the childbearing wife, the other is for other reasons, and so forth. Again, I'm not saying I agree or disagree, it's just these are the things. And there are other things as well with teenage marriage as well, where teenagers, say someone got pregnant and they were forced into marriage, so the child wouldn't be labelled a bastard. This is what old terminology they used to use. And so all these ideas, and I think as time goes on, it changes. So the idea of religious marriage is known as sacramental marriage or sacrament marriage. And this was especially in Christianity, nikah in Islam, and nuasin in Judaism. Again, these are all the Abrahamic religions, various other names, each in their own constraints as what constitutes or enter into a valid religious marriage. And then we also go into different tribal groups, religious authorities, and so forth. And like I said, it's all based on this idea of contract. The word marriage comes from the Old French mariage, which is itself descended from the Vulgar Latin, meaning ultimately tracing to maritus and the past participle of to marry. So as time goes on, we will see that marriage will change. Some people won't. We have now civil partnerships. We have all these different things, and with all this, it all ends in the way of how it can work. So when we look at in marriage, most people marry in monogamy, which means the individual has only one spouse during their lifetime or at any one time. And people did this for many years. Now some people have different arranged marriage. They have marriages which have sort of a bit more flexibility. Again, don't know whether it works or not. I have worked with clients who have been in polygamous relationships and polygamous marriages, and the issues it brings up. Me personally, I'd only like to be married to one person. I think having been married to multiple people, I think is a really complicated issue, and I think you have to have either a lot of ways of working, everybody has to have agreements and so forth. Like I said, we talk about polygamy as well, and then what I think is the next thing is we go into what we call plural marriage, which is a group marriage. It's a form of a polygamy, more than 2 persons from a family unit. Now we hear about this in certain religions. We hear about this in the Mormons and so forth. They do this, and so over time, all these things are changing. Same-sex marriages are becoming now legal in most countries. Some countries are still against it, but I think over time we will see this changing, because the idea of marriage is about the love you have for each other. And I do believe that when people marry, they must marry for the right reasons. So, some people married, if they were homosexual, they married a woman or they married a man because of society's stigma. Nowadays, people don't do that so much. And I think it is actually I think it takes a lot of bravery to realise that the marriage you had to a heterosexual partner doesn't always work. And that's okay, because we evolve, we change, we have different ways of feelings and how we work. So marriage to me it's changed so much in the last 100 years, and probably more so in the last 20 years, probably even 10. But again, we have to always look at all these different things, and now most people are combined marriages. This also goes into nuclear family, combined families, and so forth. So over this time, the idea of law is that when you get married, you get a witness and you write a marriage certificate. And so all these ideas are just over time change, and every religion has different meanings to it. I'm not going to go into every religion, how it works, but I know, for example, I spoke about the Abrahamic religions, but for example, in Hinduism, it's called Bhai, which is to be a sacred duty that entails both religions and social obligations. And it is regarded to be an important samskara, or a rite of passage. So actually to be married is very much, it also talks about the 4 goals of existence. So dharma is righteousness, Artha is wealth, Kama is desire, and Moksha is liberation. And the purpose of marriage samskara is to fulfill the goal of Kama, desire. So desire is then through that, so then desire then gets to Moksha, where then either partner dies or you both die. And I think this is where over time we will see things change. And I know, for example, when we're looking at the idea of health, it was always till death do us part and so forth, and these things change. So some people will marry for different reasons. If they know someone's dying, they may get married just to feel that that's something they wanted to complete before they pass. And again, this also goes into the idea of our next category, which is divorce. And divorce is probably the negative side of marriage. Because of marriage not working, divorce becomes then, and then we get into annulments and so forth. So I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to explain some of the pain, because I have worked with a lot of people who've got divorced, and there's also some really good people who do help, coaches who help with divorce. So anyway, till next time, I'm going to speak about divorce next.